The morning opened quietly at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, yet beneath the routine hum there was an unmistakable sense of anticipation. Patients were adjusting to their daily rituals, nurses hurried through corridors with clipboards in hand, and the steady rhythm of medical equipment filled the air. It looked like any other day, but the staff and patients knew it wasn't. Whispers carried quickly through the wards. The President of the United States was coming. Donald Trump had announced an unplanned visit to meet with wounded service members and veterans receiving treatment there. For outsiders, it might have seemed like a political appearance, another gesture meant for the cameras. But to the men and women lying in hospital beds, the prospect of a visit meant something more personal. It was recognition and acknowledgement that their sacrifices had been seen. Among those recovering that day was Lieutenant Aaron Blake, a 26-year-old Navy officer. He had been gravely injured during a mission overseas when an explosion left his legs shattered. His road to recovery was long and painful, and though the ward buzzed with speculation about the president's arrival, Aaron remained withdrawn. Around him, soldiers debated what to expect, some hopeful, others cynical. But Aaron wasn't interested in politics or photo opportunities. He wanted honesty, something he didn't believe politicians could give. Even so, when he noticed the sudden movements of the security detail sweeping through the halls, curiosity stirred within him. He wondered silently what kind of man the president would be when standing face to face with suffering. Secret Service agents moved with sharp precision, scanning corners, speaking into earpieces, and ensuring every detail was secure. The hospital atmosphere thickened under the weight of their presence. Nurses whispered discreetly, patients adjusted their posture, and visitors were gently directed to waiting areas. The environment carried a mixture of excitement, anxiety, and reverence. From his bed near a wide window, Aaron watched the preparations unfold. His roommate, Petty Officer James Hunter, smirked as he adjusted his blanket. $5, says he doesn't even look us in the eye, James joked. Aaron gave the faintest smile but stayed silent. He wasn't a gambler, and he knew cynicism often came easier than hope. Folding his hands over the thin hospital sheet, he waited down the corridor. A young nurse named Claire Thomas was having her own internal struggle. Her brother had served in Afghanistan and never returned home. For her, the president's visit was deeply personal. She wanted him to see more than statistics or uniforms. She wanted him to see people, each carrying a story of sacrifice. And somewhere deep inside, she wondered whether he might notice Aaron, the quiet officer who rarely spoke about his pain. The arrival happened almost suddenly. First came the echo of polished shoes against the floor. Then the low murmur of advisors, and finally, Donald Trump himself entered the ward. His presence seemed larger than the space, confident yet visibly softened at the sight of injured service members lying in their beds. He walked slowly, shaking hands, listening carefully to introductions from doctors and nurses. Some soldiers grinned, asking eagerly for photos, while others stayed reserved, unsure of how to respond. Trump leaned in close as he spoke to each patient, sometimes offering a gentle pat on the shoulder, sometimes simply nodding in silence as their stories were told. When he reached Aaron's bed, the room grew noticeably quieter. Aaron, dressed in a simple navy sweatshirt, met his gaze steadily, no smile, no unnecessary words, just firm eye contact. Trump extended his hand. "Lieutenant Blake, thank you for your service. I know you've endured a lot." Aaron hesitated, briefly before gripping the president's hand firmly. "Yes, sir," he answered, in a controlled tone. Their handshake lingered for a moment longer than usual, and Trump tilted his head slightly, as though sensing something deeper in the young officer than physical wounds. They exchanged a few words. Trump asked about his recovery, his family, his service. Aaron responded politely but cautiously, his answers short and measured. Cameras clicked quietly in the background, careful to keep their distance. James broke the seriousness by calling out, "Mr. President, can I get a picture? I want proof, for my kids." Trump chuckled warmly and agreed, posing for a quick snapshot that brightened the atmosphere. Laughter rippled through the ward, though Aaron remained reserved, his hands resting quietly on his lap. Claire observed closely. She sensed that Aaron wanted to say something significant but was holding it back. Trump seemed to notice too. Before moving on, he paused, leaning slightly closer. "If there's ever something you want to tell me, Lieutenant, I'll listen." His words carried a weight that settled heavily in the room. Aaron's jaw tightened. He gave a slight nod but remained silent. For now, silence was his only answer. That night, the ward buzzed with conversation. Soldiers replayed the day, sharing impressions and jokes. James was ecstatic, already calling his family with stories. But Aaron lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The president's words echoed in his mind. "If there's ever something you want to tell me, I'll listen." He wasn't sure he believed them. Politicians often promised to listen, but rarely did. Still, something stirred within him. For months he had kept his thoughts buried, the grief, the guilt, the questions about survival. Now, for the first time, he wondered if speaking those truths might matter. During her late-night rounds, Claire noticed his restlessness. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly, adjusting his IV. Aaron shook his head. "It's nothing." Claire gave him a knowing look. Sometimes nothing weighs more than everything. She didn't push further, but her words stayed with him. Turning toward the window, Aaron watched the city lights flicker in the distance. A thought formed, maybe it was time to finally tell his truth. 2 days later, whispers spread again. The president was returning. Many assumed the first visit had been the end of it, but Trump had decided to come back quietly, without press or spectacle. No cameras, no staged moments, just conversations. The staff moved efficiently to prepare, though the atmosphere was calmer. Stripped of fanfare, when Trump re-entered the ward, Aaron was startled. He hadn't expected to see him again. Approaching his bed with a small smile, Trump said, "Lieutenant Blake, I told you I'd listen if you wanted to talk." Aaron's throat tightened. He hadn't prepared for this. James nudged him with a grin. "Guess you're out of excuses, buddy." Trump pulled a chair closer and sat down. "No pressure, just talk to me like you would to anyone else." For the first time, Aaron felt the walls he had built start to crack. He realized this moment wasn't about politics, it was about truth. Slowly, he began to speak. "Sir, I don't usually talk about what happened. Most people don't want the details, they just hear the headline. Injured in service. But there's more to it." Trump leaned in, eyes fixed on him. "We were on patrol in Kandahar. It was supposed to be routine, but nothing is routine out there. An IED struck our vehicle. I lived, but 2 of my men didn't." His voice faltered, then steadied. "They were my responsibility. Every day I asked myself why I came home when they didn't." The room fell into a hush. Machines beeped quietly in the background. James lowered his gaze, and Claire froze in the doorway, holding a chart tightly. Trump remained silent, his expression grave, offering no interruptions. Aaron's voice grew stronger as he continued. "Everyone tells me I should be proud, that I served my country. But they don't see the nights when I wake up hearing the blast again. They don't feel the guilt that eats at me. I didn't want to say this to you, because you're the president. But you asked for honesty, so here it is. Sometimes I wonder if coming home was even worth it, because I don't know how to live with what I left behind." The weight of his words filled the air. Claire's eyes glistened. James shifted uncomfortably. Trump stayed still, his hands clasped, eyes steady, not filled with pity, but with understanding. Finally, he spoke softly. "Lieutenant, those words are heavier than any metal. Most people don't want to hear them, but I needed to. Thank you for trusting me." No one spoke for a long moment. Even the hum of the machines seemed quieter. For once, silence itself carried meaning. Claire eventually broke it gently. "Lieutenant, you're here because your life still has purpose. You may not see it yet, but others do." Her voice carried grief but also hope, shaped by her own loss. Aaron's eyes flickered toward her, then back to Trump. For the first time, he felt lighter, not because the pain had disappeared, but because he no longer carried it alone. Trump stood, placing a hand on Aaron's shoulder. "You've said something I'll never forget." His tone was calm, sincere, and for Aaron, that mattered. Not because the words came from a president, but because they came from a man who truly listened. That night, Aaron lay quietly, drained but relieved. His truth had finally been spoken, not hidden. Guilt had been his silent companion for months, but now it was shared, and somehow that made it lighter. When Claire came by, she offered him a small smile. "You did something brave today." Aaron frowned. "Brave? I've done nothing but sit in this bed." She shook her head. "You told the truth, and truth can be scarier than bullets." Aaron folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, and placed it inside the drawer by his bedside before taking it out again just to read it once more. The handwriting was uneven in places, but the message was direct and deeply personal. It wasn't wrapped in political language or filled with formalities. It was simple, raw, and human. For Aaron, that meant more than any medal or ribbon he had ever received. This wasn't about publicity or recognition. It wasn't about being part of a headline or a photo op. It was about being seen as a man carrying a weight few could understand. For someone battling survivor's guilt every single day, that acknowledgement mattered more than decorations pinned to a uniform. James, ever quick with humor, leaned over from his bed with a grin. "Well, look at you getting mail straight from the White House. Don't let it go to your head, Lieutenant." Aaron only gave a faint smile, folding the letter back into its envelope. "It's just words," he said softly, though deep down he knew it was more than that. For the first time, his pain didn't feel entirely useless. There was a sense, however faint, that it carried meaning beyond himself. Over the following weeks, Claire began noticing a shift in Aaron. He wasn't just quietly enduring anymore. He had started talking, not a lot, but enough that the other patients began to notice. It wasn't forced speeches or motivational cliches. It was raw honesty. He spoke about the struggles of healing, not just physically but emotionally. He admitted the nights he lay awake, haunted by memory. That vulnerability drew others in. Young soldiers who had just arrived, still frightened and unsure. found themselves opening up to him. One afternoon, a young Marine, with severe burns along his arm, sat beside Aaron's bed and whispered, "I feel like I'm nothing now, like I'm useless." Aaron leaned toward him, his voice steady but gentle. "You're still you. The hardest battles are the ones nobody sees, and you're fighting them every single day. That matters." Claire, standing nearby, watched this exchange with her chest tightening. Aaron was becoming something new, not just a patient, but a quiet leader, someone whose honesty gave others permission to face their own pain. Later that evening, she told him, "You're changing lives here, Aaron." He shook his head. "I'm just saying what I wish someone had told me." But inside, he recognized the truth in her words. He had stopped carrying his burden entirely. Alone. Back in Washington, President Trump carried Aaron's words with him as well. Amid the noise of politics, debates, and endless schedules, the image of that ward and the weight of Aaron's confession stayed lodged in his mind. He had listened to thousands of stories in his role, but this one lingered, demanding reflection. For once, he recognized that leadership was not always about delivering answers. Sometimes it was about holding still, keeping quiet, and allowing another person's truth to fill the silence. Weeks later, Trump returned to Walter Reed for a larger visit. The ward was busier this time, with staff prepared for a more official event. Yet when he entered, he walked directly to Aaron's bed before greeting anyone else. "Lieutenant Blake," he said warmly, "I wanted to see how you're doing." Aaron sat a little straighter, his legs still bandaged but his eyes clearer than before. "I'm healing, sir, slowly, but I'm healing." Trump nodded with genuine approval. "I heard you've been talking with other soldiers, helping them through their struggles. That's leadership, Evan, off the battlefield." Aaron was taken aback. "I'm not leading anything. I'm just trying to be honest." Trump leaned closer. "That honesty is worth more than 1,000 speeches. People need to hear it." Aaron didn't fully understand at the time, but those words planted a seed. His pain and his story weren't just personal burdens anymore, they were something that could guide others. Not long after, Aaron was told that he had been invited to speak at a small ceremony honoring veterans at the White House. His first instinct was to refuse. The thought of standing at a podium, of exposing his pain before strangers, terrified him. To him, public speaking was harder than facing combat. But Claire encouraged him. "You've already proven your strength by surviving," she reminded him softly. "Telling the truth isn't weakness, it's courage." James, of course, added his usual teasing. "Come on, man, imagine the bragging rights. My roommate speaking at the White House. You'll make me famous by association." Despite his hesitation, Aaron agreed, not because he wanted attention, but because he realized it wasn't about him. It was about speaking for others who carried silent wounds but couldn't put them into words. When the day of the ceremony came, Aaron stood at the podium in the White House, his hands trembling slightly. Trump stood nearby, offering him an encouraging nod. The room was filled with veterans, families, and leaders. But for Aaron, the only thing that mattered was telling the truth. He began slowly. "I never thought I'd be here. Honestly, I never thought I deserved to be here. I came home when 2 of my men didn't. For months, I asked myself why." His voice steadied as he continued. "But I've learned something. Survival isn't a curse. It's a responsibility to honor those who didn't make it back. To live fully, even when it's hard. And sometimes, living fully means admitting just how hard it really is." The audience fell into a deep silence. Some wiped away tears. Others nodded quietly in recognition. Trump himself remained still, visibly moved. For Aaron, that silence was the greatest honor. Silence meant they had truly listened. After the ceremony, veterans and families approached him, some with tears in their eyes. "You spoke for us," one widow whispered, clutching his hand. Aaron realized then that his pain had found purpose. His survival was no longer about guilt. It was about carrying forward the voices of those who couldn't speak for themselves. Privately, Trump congratulated him. "Lieutenant, you've done something I couldn't. You've made people feel seen." Aaron only replied humbly, "I just told the truth." But deep within, he knew his mission had changed. His new battlefield was not overseas. It was here, helping others confront the invisible scars of war. Back at Walter Reed, Aaron embraced his recovery with renewed determination. He joined group therapy sessions, encouraging fellow soldiers to open up. Claire often joined in, proud of the man he was becoming. Their connection deepened quietly, unspoken but undeniable. 2 people healing side by side. James, of course, teased them both. "Careful, Claire, he's going to walk out of here with more than new legs." The 3 of them laughed together, the kind of laughter that only comes after surviving storms. Aaron no longer felt like a man crushed by guilt. He felt like a man with purpose, and that purpose extended beyond himself, shared with all who carried hidden scars. Months later, Aaron was discharged. Walking slowly with the aid of a cane, he paused outside the hospital. For so long, Walter Reed had been both his prison and his place of rebirth. Claire stood beside him, and James waved from a window above. Before leaving, Aaron pulled Trump's letter from his pocket one last time. "Your words will not be forgotten." I folded it carefully and slipped it back into his jacket. He understood. Now, his survival wasn't about asking, "Why me?" It was about asking, "What now?" And the answer was clear: to live, to speak, and to honor the fallen by carrying their stories forward. The greatest lesson hadn't come from Trump's speeches or promises. It had come from the silence he had given the space to let Aaron's truth finally be heard. And in that silence, a soldier once broken found his voice.